Welcome back to the ITAM Kitchen, the place where we have a lot of fun in so many different ways that you never realize software asset management can have. And we have our guest coming back. Disappears, that's good. And some disappearing.
And I'm going to disappear again for a second, so.
This is about being able to have that open dialogue and be able to have that collaborative discussion on topics you typically don't hear about. And the whole idea behind this was to figure out how can we help the community come back together. We operate so often in silos. How can we have a more collaborative type discussion and also have the community chime in at the same time? That's the whole idea behind it. In the last couple of days, we've hit one of those I wouldn't say sore topics, one of the core topics, AMDB versus CMDB. And trust me, I've had some people say, "What's an AMDB?" I'm not used to it, and that's fair. That's fair. Some of the veterans, we by default we just use it. It's an asset management database versus a configuration management database, and that's what we've been talking about the last couple of days. Is exactly that. Deanna will be joining us shortly. She had a few things to do before coming in. Jeremy's come back to return. Patrick's here. And we also have Sasha here. Alexander Golev from SAM Expert, who's joining us.
Yes, hello. Glad to be back.
Yeah, exactly. And so we actually have a lot of fun. And by the way, from a promotional perspective, if anybody has anything you want to share and you'd like to be on the ITAM Kitchen, please reach out to me, DM me on LinkedIn or reach out to me on YouTube and be able to put that out there. So the whole idea is I want you to be able to have your voice. Maybe there's a topic or you're passionate about, etc. This is a platform to talk to. This is the whole idea behind it. Let's talk to make that happen. And you've seen a lot of that since over the last week. We've been now doing this 8 days. Oh my gosh. 8 days, it adds up. And we're doing it every day for the rest of this month. And then we're going to have more of a governance, more ritual as far as we can make a regular cadence perspective. But we're getting it started because it's about making sure you have the ability to listen and learn more. This is not about the rudimentary stuff. We're on the advanced level. We're actually up here. We're not here. We're not kind of medium. We're actually in advanced activities. And most of the folks you've heard so far have 15 plus years of experience. Some up to 30. It just depends who it is and who you're talking to. And these are all friends of mine. I'll be honest. They're all friends of mine. At least they call themselves friends of mine. But it's being able to put that in place. So with that, I know there was a question that came up. So I didn't see where the chat came from. But go ahead and ask the question.
It was from me, Bill. Let's not assume that everybody who joins understands what we're talking about, because I know you've already had 1 or 2 calls on this particular subject. So can you please start with a very simple explanation of CMDB versus AMDB? If there is a simple explanation.
I love how he throws it out there and then he starts wheeling it back.
Come on.
Make it short unless you can't. So funny.
Yeah,
it's a very British thing to do.
No, it's a great question, though, to provide a good foundation. And if in the chat, please put in where you're coming in from today. But back to
it's for my purposes, Bill. I want to actually tell you that I still try to draw the line, and I kind of understand what that is, but in my experience, they're always conflated in a single piece of software.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Correct. That's a nice choice of words too.
I'll go ahead and open it since I was busting Sasha's chops. For me, and how I describe it, they serve complementary purposes. The asset management database contains the non-changeable, the fixed data attributes around a particular asset. And these are the stuff that are immutable. They don't change as the asset goes through its life cycle.
Okay.
On the configuration side, that is a record of all the things that asset talks to or relates to or supports as part of its delivery to the end user, to the network itself, to the different services that that user or that device ends up giving back to the organization. So in my book, again, always take an opportunity to plug the book, I describe it like a two sides of the same coin. That one. It's two sides of the same coin. You've got to have both of those details. Historically, the limitations of the technology were easier to break it up into two different tables. There's plenty of technology that combines them into one table. So unless you are very large and federating and having different systems doing different things, almost always they're mashed together.
Thank you. Makes sense. And this is why I was confused when I first saw this subject, because I don't come from the... This is a funny one. So I'm a software asset manager. I'm not an IT asset manager. And obviously software asset management is a part of ITAM. But you can't do SAM without good data. And that data comes from various sources. And personally, I have a lot of mistrust to what we call CMDB. CMDB is normally now alive. And I can get to that during the conversation, why I have this mistrust. But what I certainly was the what I'm looking for. I would never, I never have heard the term AMDB, because assets are always in the CMDB. Whomever you talk to, they always call it CMDB. And this is why this topic is quite interesting. And again, for my purposes and for purposes of those who haven't seen the previous lives, and you should never assume that people on YouTube, even LinkedIn, saw the previous events. Just very quickly, why is it important? Why is the difference important?
Somebody else want to jump in on that one, or I can keep going?
Patrick, you want to jump in?
Why is it important? All right. So pointing towards the point that Jeremy had made about what doesn't change about an asset record, right? For me, building on to what Jeremy just said, we've got the asset side handles or accommodates the financial information for the device, which from an operational perspective really isn't that important, right? You need, from the CMDB perspective, you want to know how that asset is functioning, where that asset's functioning, what it's touching. On the asset side, for me, it's about when did we purchase it? When did we acquire it? How old is it? Who's paying for it, right? Where's it being charged back to? That also leads into the asset, and that's applicable to hardware and or software. On the CMDB side, right? For me, it's always been about the operational side. Where's it going? What is it? The point of reference in regards to, how does it work within the environment? And then taking it further would be from a support perspective, right? Something goes wrong, right? We want to be able to go look at the CMDB, look at the data, look at potentially connect the dots between where that software is functioning, where that hardware is, maybe depending on if it's a cloud-based or if we're running it off the server, we want to know what server we're hitting, right? That's where the dependency on the CMDB side for me is. The asset side is really about the financial piece, how we acquired it, when we acquired it, how old is it? You might tie some contracts to that because you want to know what's going on with the licensing and how long, the other variables that are aligned.
Well, I'll jump on that. Hold that thought. Okay.
I'm done now, so I'll hold. But yeah, that's really how I think about it.
I will jump on that, on the history of purchases and also change management, because and I'll explain why. So I deal with Microsoft. Then the ubiquitous Microsoft, which is everywhere, and normally, unless you really piss them off, if there's a corporate audit, they take a a point-in-time snapshot of all your data from various sources. They're supposed to take it from various sources, including CMDB, and they assess your current point-in-time licensing. In certain edge cases, they may actually ask you to provide when the assets were purchased, when the software was actually installed, from what day. It actually serves completely zero purpose, with the exception of, I'm saying completely zero, almost zero purpose, with the exception of just basically punishing you for being naughty. But there's no legal outcome, with one massive exception, which is service providers, which have to pay monthly, and therefore when they are audited, all the changes in the audit period are vitally important. So things like upgraded processors, it's a fact of life. They get upgraded. Things like shutting down a server for maintenance, things like reconfiguring the clusters, bringing in new clusters, decommissioning hardware, that directly contributes to the bottom line on the ELP, on the audit ELP. So where is that supposed to be stored?
So that should be, technically, part of that data is going to be stored with the service consumer.
Right.
And part of that data is going to be stored with your own data. So the difference then is that, to Patrick's point, the procurement and fiduciary information of that software use rights sits in the asset table. But on the CI side, it's going to tell you, hey, I've got part of the information for this calculation over here, but I need permission to get to these pieces of data that exist over on this other side. So that's where the division starts to come into. It's, to Patrick's point, it is not just saying what data there is, but it's also telling you who's got that data, when was the last time that data was changed, who's the responsible party, and can you get access to that or not?
I'm going to hijack this whole conversation, gentlemen. bear with me. My biggest beef with traditional CMDBs / AMDBs, as I've just learned, thank you very much, and I said it in a positive way, is that they are manually maintained. And as a person who's done software asset management for 25 plus years, and I've done on the client side, so I've never audited clients. I defend them, but I've done over, it's closing on 200 right now. I don't trust it because it's manual, because it's not actual. And to give you a scale of it, an organization, so that was the worst case. An organization with 50,000 people had 90,000 assets in CMDB, out of which about 55,000, so overlapping back on the actual assets, were outdated and non-existent, and therefore the other difference was not even in the CMDB. And the reason for that was very simple. It wasn't gathering actual information. And what absolutely baffled me, I understand the reason why, for example, certain assets cannot be automatically discovered, because they sit in some kind of secret department, military grade. You can't get access to that. And I get the idea of them sitting there being manually added. That particular piece of software, very popular, I don't want to call names right now, didn't even have any sort of indication of whether that data is validated or verified against the actual live source. So therefore, there was no way of telling. And imagine how it affected licensing renewals.
Yeah. Right. So the issue there is not really where the data is stored. It's about access and proving when was the last time you gathered those details. Because remember, there's another, when we start talking about data, we've
And
got
where from, Jeremy?
another-
Sorry, and where from? I want to
Yeah.
know whether that was Jeremy
Right.
putting it in, or I took it from, I don't know, system set.
Right. Right, because not all data has the same value.
Yeah.
Right. So, for example, not just Microsoft, if I remember right, is very insistent that their data comes from Intune, regardless of what
Not really.
ServiceNow Discovery. Again, edge cases. Now, IBM is very specific. It's got to be Big Fix or ILMT.
It's the BLMT, yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So you've got to be able to say in your CMDB, when you're running your license counters, this is coming from ILMDB or ILMT as of 24 hours ago, 36 hours ago,
Exactly.
40 hours ago. So that's where, and we mentioned it. I want to give credit to Patrick. It might have been Deanna. The idea of metadata that's got to be captured. That information can get long, it can get hairy, but it's necessary to know what's going on in the environment. And some systems can't do it all, so they break up the work across multiple tables, hence federated between the asset records and the CMDB records. So you as a asset manager need to know what kind of data you're dealing with in those two systems and whether or not it's actually useful for the question you're trying to answer.
Is that common across modern CMDB software, or is it something that's seriously lacking?
Ooh. Ooh.
I know. You're not going to get easy questions.
Let's see some of the other. I'll sit on my heels on that and give Bill and Patrick a chance to jump in.
See, I'm not calling names. I'm not asking you to actually tell me that beep is really beep.
There are pros and cons all the way around. There is no perfect solution, let me say it that way, that has it all, where it's very systematic, very flawless. I'll use flawless, even the imperfection, where it all works. You can go side by side and you do pros and cons on all of them. All we're trying to do is, from a standardization perspective, from the conversation, right? How do we portray it so for the different roles, or the asset manager, software asset manager, configuration manager, right? And we can throw FinOps in there too if we want to. That's actually kind of married in there as well. And I'll just mention it because it is. I mean, they're brethren as well. But for all intents and purposes, we all have different uses for the data. We all have different needs. We all have different ways we look at the data. Typically, your configuration data depends what it is. Maybe relational, maybe not. Asset management's always relational, always has been, always will be, just because we have so many different things we have to work on. We have to think about, okay, what are we linking? The contracts, the user models, makes, whatever, right? You look at software asset management, you know all that. I mean, there's lots of different complexities, and even the contracts, et cetera. And then we have contracts asset management as well. I'm not saying we don't, but there's a lot of different complexities, and that's also about the relations. What we are trying to do and portray here is saying it's not a simple solution to say, here's one system that solves it all. That's all we're trying to do.
Well, as we all know, the system will never solve it all unless you have a process and the person that's looking after it. To be honest, with all, I don't like asking the question whose fault that is, but
we came across that
in that particular scenario with 55 assets being completely out of date, 55,000 assets. I'm not saying 55 assets, 55,000 assets completely out of date and non-existing.
Well,
what do we need to fix?
Did you want to jump in?
No. Do I have what? No. I'm sitting out this one.
Well, So I will say this, it really, depending on whether or not you break this up, really depends upon the size of the organization and the response the tool is able to give. One of the strategies—
maturity of the organization too. Maturity.
Right. So one of the strategies of breaking this out, the federating, is that your CIs are going to be updated almost constantly as relationships change, as demands change, as employees change. The assets are not going to change that often. So don't make the tool recalculate one single table when you've got, you really only need to be recalculating part of a table. For when, instance, you get your feed from Active Directory or your identity system saying, hey, here's the people that logged in the last 24 hours. So that's where I make recommendations for folks. If you're small, if you're not making a lot of changes in your environment, if it's rather stable, a single table, both asset and CI, is going to do you great. The larger you get, the more changes are happening, the more automation you need in order to get that data. You're going to need something that's going to break those tables out into different smaller sections and spread the workload out.
And when you say size of the organization, it may be user-driven as far as size. It may be device-driven.
Oh, yeah. Well, and
right. So there's different ways of looking.
Service is the same way, like Sasha was talking about. If it's a service provider and you've got some complicated SPLAs running around, you're doing a lot of API calls to a bunch of different systems. That's going to make your CMDB all that more complicated. It's probably going to have
30,000 servers, 5,000 users. Yeah, totally.
On the other hand, because of the extremely, I would say, very high requirements, almost needs to be 100% accurate to the accuracy and trustworthiness of the data in a service provider. You can rely on just automatic sources, which will completely eliminate the problem of manual updates. Well, I'm saying completely. Things like configuration changes, like asset going into a maintenance mode, would still need to be recorded. Stuff like that. So, and there's an interesting comment in the chat from Egbert. Source of truth. Here's another thing, and I promise I'll stop. Well, which I'm not sure I'm going to keep to that promise. Please bear with me. So it's no more of it's not a comment. It's more of an observation. In real life, I found that in large organizations, there is no proclaimed golden source of data or single source of truth. We had a case when we had to consolidate 6 different data sources. All of those sources were imperfect, and none of them could be considered a single source of truth. So we had to create a whole system of rules, checks, and balances to what extent we trust that data and which particular data types come from each source, and again, with what level of trust. So at the end, we ended up with a pretty accurate system, which was still inaccurate. It wasn't perfect because none of the sources was accurate. None of the sources was fully trusted, but altogether, balancing each other, they created, I would say, a truthful picture, but there was no single source of truth.
So I've run into those sorts of situations before. One of the questions that I always ask my clients is about tolerance. What is your organization's tolerance for risk around this data being wrong or out of date within the parameters? Give some parameters where you can say, yeah, we got a little bit of fudge. And that actually will help in crafting that source of truth, just like you did, decide on which source of truth needs to carry over another. But more importantly, it also helps with the communication, which was a big topic yesterday. Just how close you're going to get. It's not always going to be 100%, but you can anticipate, if you know what that tolerance is, you can say, well, we know this amount, and we're pretty sure about this other amount on either side, 2 or 3%.
I think there's something else in there. When you talk about systems and sources of truth, right? You know, I've always kind of operated on at least two types of tools to do that. But when you start talking about LMT with IBM, right? It almost comes down to a contractual requirement, right? Because if IBM's only going to say, I don't care what everything else is telling me, this is the only one that works. This is the only one we're going to take, right? Let me pose it as a question. Do we have to manage it in that sort of way? Because, you know, if you're in a hardware environment and you've got a tool that's already running, and then you introduce another discovery tool, right? That first one has been viewed as the source. It has been the one, right? You bring that second one in, and all of a sudden you start looking at data, and you're saying, okay, coming out of tool A, I see this one, but coming out of tool B, I don't see it, but I see this other one, but I don't see it there, right? So I had, and firewalls come into play and all this other stuff, right? So the question, I've always said, you know, having a couple tools in place just to keep those key tools and validate and bounce off of each other, because you're going to find some of those gaps.
Exactly. And I recommend not just limiting yourself to asset management inventory. Go outside your tower. Cybersecurity has an inventory because they can't protect what they don't know is out there. Your service management teams, especially identity access, they've got an inventory of all the user records. Those people should be logging into your systems. If they're not, where's the system? How are they doing their work? And that's
you have your security software. I mean, there's lots of, you have your antivirus, and it just keeps going on and on.
An antivirus is usually an agent-based system. Intune is an agent-based system.
Yep.
Cybersecurity, port scanning.
Firewall, they have their own scanners.
That's just IP scanning, range scanning. That should be able to catch what the agents. How many times have we seen an agent disappear and stop reporting back to the home base? Mix it up. Use different technologies and different strategies in order to kind of Swiss cheese cover your data gaps. And that gets back to Sasha's concept of crafting your own source of truth.
Well, it's about, I call it alignment. That's part of the alignment. That's when you bring the teams together, because the teams are already working. They already have their tools, they're working with it, and that's great. I'm saying don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I know it's an American term typically. But figure out how you can leverage it and align it so that you can actually work together, and then you find out you can help each other out as you move forward. That's what management wants us to do.
Yeah.
That's what they expect us to do, right?
I found a large organization, very well known. The cybersecurity team had not configured about a 10th of their end user endpoints. They didn't see them. They didn't know they were out there. The only reason why we knew they were out there is because we saw end users logging into Google worksheets. And so all of the software license calculations were off by 10%. Great, we solved that. But now cybersecurity just realized they have this great big gaping hole that they had no idea about.
When one is enough.
And it only takes one, right? So they were very appreciative. And that makes for a very quick win if you do that early in your program. You want to talk about having sponsorship alignment, getting a champion for your project? Ooh, cybersecurity's got the blank check right now. They'll happily help you out.
And it goes back to what you just said. It goes back to what you just said. They can't protect what they don't know they have, right? And,
exactly.
And that's where the asset piece comes in, right? And it's about building that relationship that with all of those folks, right? When you start talking about IBM, right? Who owns the IBM platform, right? Working with that person to understand what they're doing and the tool and making sure they understand those constraints that are associated with that. You know, Sasha's point with everything he's doing with Microsoft, right? Those are the capabilities that we have to align to, right? And, you know, kind of goes back to what we talked about yesterday about being not only the voice of reason, but sometimes you have to be a hammer, you know, sometimes, right? You know, so yeah, I see this role as an asset manager more just as much as connecting dots than anything else. You know, we're almost like a switchboard operator at times.
Oh, we are, because of the amount of people we have to work with, right? If you look at the truly mature organizations doing asset management, so just really mature. I mean, I'm talking about extremely mature, right? They have about, I'll go out there, probably about 30 different data sources going into a single database, and from there it's distributing, whether it's asset management, et cetera, right? And they're going from all the different locations. And I'm talking about large financial firms, because they understand the risk. They've been doing this already for 15 to 20 years. I mean, they were showing me back then, okay, here it is. I go, oh, wow, you've really thought this through. It's like, we had to. That was a response. We had to, because we didn't know our environment. And we had to secure ourselves before all this internet stuff we're talking about, right? Because they just were required to. And from that standpoint, they say, okay, how do we bring this all together? Because we have the team members out there. We're just not talking with each other. And everybody was in the room. They were totally in the room. And it's like, and they were passionate just like us. It's like, oh my gosh, I'd love for all organizations to have this passion, right? Yeah.
And to bring it back to the discussion topic at hand, that's another advantage of having a separate CI record for the asset record. If you've got 30 different data sources that have got to sort themselves out, do that in another table before you, and clean that up before you bring it in to another table that's got static data that doesn't change that often.
And if your executive gives you grief over it, say you have to, and explain some of the flow. Don't get into granular details. You can if you want, but some executives like it. But outside of that, it's like, I need the teams to work together.
Yeah, I never had an executive say, don't do that. I have had subject matter experts and process owners say, I don't want to do that, but I've never had an executive say, don't work together.
Oh, it's not working. It's not that they're not working together. It's just more they didn't want to go the additional expense and realize, okay, here's additional overhead.
And that's exactly one of the questions where I was going to go with this, right? You know, you look at today's world, right? A company's going to go out and assess, you know, that they're going to get a new contract, right? They've got an existing tool that's kind of costly. They start looking at other options, right? I was the proponent saying, you know what? Maybe we need to look at this from both sides. But when we're talking about budget cutting and saving money, sometimes we're just given a car to drive. So, you know, but at the same time, okay, how do I build that? How do I build that trust, and how do I build the understanding that, you know what, having these two tools, I understand that it's expensive. I get it, right? But we're minimizing some risk here. Especially when you start talking about eliminating tools that have been in place for a long time, and then you're going to net new, because we've all been there. You implement a new tool, you're not going to get to everywhere where that existing one is. You're just not going to. It's going to take you time to get there.
Patrick, I got to send you my book.
Okay. Here's the problem, Jeremy. I don't read.
So the envy of everyone, I have a signed one.
Oh, I'll take a signed one. That'll be great.
I will send you a signed one. Again, the second edition comes out in February, so you're going to have to wait a bit. But I'll get
that's all right. I'm good with that. Absolutely. And I'll read it, I promise.
But this is a great topic because this is about the collaboration, which is the real core of what today was about, right? How do we drive ourselves to the future? How do we make sure we are aligned? How do we have the drive that conversation? And Sasha, you brought up some great questions. Okay, from a software asset management, which really hasn't been our forte, and that's really what we haven't talked about in detail. But you bring up an excellent point. Okay, you're dependent upon this data to be dead 100% accurate. Well, 100% is probably not going to happen, but you'd love for something to be at least 75 to 90% accurate. Then you can at least make some judgment calls versus just winging it, right? And say 45,000 devices aren't coming in correctly. Totally. And that's where we have to, when we talk about the AMDB and CMDB, where this whole entire conversation has gone for a couple of days, we start from a database perspective. But as we've evolved this conversation, we found that it's not really a database conversation. It's
lots of decisions to be made, especially multi-source. It's not just the database, because I mean, I could arguably build a good CMDB/AMDB using Excel and various sources. You know, you can't imagine what Excel can do. It's more important to, from that example, when we had to consolidate multiple sources, there's a lot of decision making, and it's not a one-day process. And as much as everybody's tired of the same message, it's not a set it and forget it system.
Correct. I agree. However, we're seeing a lot more technology getting applied to the problem. I have noticed the trend over the last couple of years. The CMDB is really getting into a position to become a digital twin of the IT department. What I mean by that is it's a model, a representation of what all the little doodads are doing, what the users are doing, and how the systems are connecting back and forth to each other. Well, once you have that model, and that model is constantly being updated, then set the model up to fix some of its own problems. If it sees a segment go down because it's not getting reports on machines that used to be, say, part of that farm, what sort of actions could it take before it brings in a human being? Was it a power outage? Was it a communication issue? Is the janitor in the closet deciding to play around and move some switches? What the AI should be smart enough to be able to say, hey, here's the likely suspects. Do I have data that says that it is or is not those likely suspects? Can I fix it myself? No. Hey, Mr. Human, go out and fix this before it becomes a real issue.
That's a great use for AI.
Yeah, that's really where I see things going. And then you start looking at, not just the health of the environment, but then where are the big services? Onboarding, offboarding, audit management, account access, data access, all of that all of a sudden starts to simplify. Thank you, guys.
Bill, can we actually pencil it down for the conversation that we need to have about AI in ITAM? That was an interesting use case.
Yeah,
I would argue it can still be solved with automation.
Sure.
But I certainly would love us to discuss it in the dedicated AI session.
Oh, we definitely are going to. Yeah, that's definitely something. Let's have that topic in use cases.
It absolutely could be done with automation, but in the time it takes to build out those scenarios, the AI should be able to see those patterns and react. Shoot, my brain's shutting down. I want to say aggressively, but on its own, agentically. That's the word I was looking for.
There's a good question in the chat, Bill. I don't know if you want to put it on screen. The decision is up to you. You're moderating this.
That's one of the second last one.
But I like that comment about the
eggs on the right, on the right track there, and that's something that I live by as well.
So do I.
Yeah,
we're data nerds. We have to be data nerds,
yeah.
right?
What's the other option?
Well, the other option is
chaos.
you're moving boxes. You're picking up physical access. You pick it up over here and you drop it off over there.
And that may be the maturity of some organizations. That's okay.
True. But
you know what?
Management is able to do that, and our end user community is getting smarter. They can pick up their own devices. They can plug in HDMI cable,
delivers and
USB cable.
Drops on their doorstep. Yeah, it's all configured. Yeah,
if it's a home office, you don't even have an opportunity to send somebody out there. You got to trust the end user to wire it up.
Interesting.
Yeah, in today's day and age, with the remote world, right? There's a couple things, right? You're packaging it up. You might build it in house. Yeah. But when you send off that laptop, docking stations, 2 monitors, keyboard, and mouse, it's out of our hands.
The neat thing that, the thing that was in vogue last decade was the Genius Bar, where you pulled the service managers out of their offices, out of their closets, and they would sit there and answer questions as end users would come up and have a problem. Hey, I forgot my laptop at home. Okay, here you go. What I'm seeing now is automated vending machines in place of the Genius Bar. You don't even have to talk to a person. You need a cable, you wander over to the vending machine, and it's like, I need one of these, I need one of that, and oh, look, M&Ms. Grab one of those two. The automated machine sends a report back, hey, this username, scan their badge, they grab this, that, and the other. If an AI is there, it can say, okay, they've made this request 4 times. What are they doing to their mouse that they need 3 in 4 days? That sort of pattern recognition, but not human generated. It'll send its own email receipt out saying, hey, I'm getting low on mobile laptops. You need to come over and refill me. That sort of communication that is driven by data. And that's where, and I'm going to bring in she's going to become the patron saint real quick, Remy, about her concept, technology, asset, data, analytics. Ta-da! That's where we're headed.
Love it.
And you got to do the jazz hands, Tasha. Ta-da! You can't do it without it.
Love it. We need a jingle here. Ta-da!
Yeah. Doesn't Apple do that? It's smart enough when it sees the camera that when you go like this or you give it a thumbs up, it does all kinds of animation.
We actually have jingles in the stream, so it's
So that's where I think the future is. And AMDB versus CI configuration management, again, it really doesn't matter in modern computing with modern technology. What's really getting down, when we really get down to the brass tacks, it's about the data, knowing where that data is coming from, where is it sitting, how much power is behind it in order to make your calculations, and then what do you do with it after?
True. Can't disagree. I mean, I wish I could disagree. It's always good when these conversations are a bit controversial and we can actually argue with each other. No, Jeremy, you're completely wrong. We're a bunch of we're just 4 agreeable people.
Well, it's not just that. You make an interesting point. We also have to be open-minded when we have these discussions. And that's part of what I see when it comes to the AMDB, CMDB discussion, is everyone says, okay, here's what it is, whether it comes from the vendor, whether it's a personal perspective, et cetera. It's like, that's great, but we need to have we need to talk about it, just the way we've been talking about a couple of days here, right? And that goes true also with the stakeholders. That's the one thing I've learned with all the integrations I've done, because I've always been the integration guy, always, because I learned how to talk, and that's how I learned how to talk to people. Is because I had to learn about the reasons and why they doing things the way they were. And I didn't tell them they were wrong. I said, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? It's how you portray your message, right? And when they realize that they can do it, even enhance what they're doing, it's like, now some people are stubborn and they won't move. That's just. It's the best way to put it. But
Lighten up,
those
Francis.
that are, yeah, but those that are open-minded, they go, oh, wow, okay, I can make my life easier and I can help you at the same time. And I'm also becoming a part of this awareness for this initiative. I'm helping you and I get more visibility with management and I'm helping my own career. Check.
Yeah.
Right.
Let me bring up an old saw from Harry Truman. It's amazing what you accomplish if you don't work, if you're not going to claim credit for it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. Expand.
Harry Truman very famously came in on the heels of FDR's death. He was the one that made the decision to continue with the Fat Man and Little Boy programs that ended the war with the atomic attack on Japan. But he was also the primary architect for NATO and the integration, the racial integration for the American Armed Forces. So was doing, he only served for 4 years. So he had to, 6 years, I should say. So he had to make some very big decisions very quickly with a Congress that was pretty well fed up with his boss. And that was kind of his methodology. He really didn't want to be president. He kind of found himself in it, decided to run again and stay for a little bit longer. But how do you take these big personalities like FDR, like McCarthy, and don't ask me to name any of the congressmen because please. He would do it very affably and would let somebody else take the credit for the idea and putting things together and getting the words on paper. He didn't need to put his name on billboards or signatures on checks. He'd let somebody else take credit for that. He knew what the score was. Happy to let somebody else take the credit for that.
Oh, it's a brilliant strategy.
If it goes wrong, somebody else
agree with
the
it.
heat.
That as well. You should always make bad prognosis, because if it gets worse, you can always say, I told you so. And if it gets better, nobody will remember what you said.
Right.
That's another one. Can I drop in a bit of controversy here, which is practical, which is real. In my practice, I have never seen a trustworthy CMDB. Therefore, if I'm helping somebody solve their licensing issues, I just don't trust it. When I enter the premises, if somebody tells me this data came from CMDB, I don't want it.
Sure.
Not a single time I've seen a CMDB data that is trustworthy. So something needs to fundamentally be fixed in a vast majority of cases. That is my opinion. Please correct me.
It's about the visibility, right? And also, one of the things the CMDB typically overlooks, and I'll use the word overlooks, some people just ignore it, but that's is identify when they look at a CMDB to actually make sure the data is accurate, which is your core point. And that's typically your CMDB folks. They're looking at putting data in there, looking, okay, how's it moving? They're not looking at the accuracy. They're not doing what we've done forever for asset management to say, okay, we want to make sure the data is accurate before you report on it. And that's not a slam on the CMDB folks. That's not at all. But it's just not been their area of focus.
I don't know of a tool yet that goes through verification.
I do now. There's a couple of them. There's a couple of them.
I do.
It's difficult.
It's not difficult.
No, it's
I
so.
my
Okay,
practice
so
around.
let me rephrase it. It's not difficult. It's tedious. It's tedious.
It is tedious. It is boring. Guess what? You got to do it. Write it
I'm not
down.
otherwise.
And that's the challenge with it, right?
Yeah.
There's been such a emphasis put on getting the data in, but we've never. What hasn't truly followed yet is the emphasis on accurately maintaining it and
Absolutely.
updating and closing out, right? So, when someone, and I see it all the time on in the past, right? You take your laptops, you return them on lease, you go into the CMDB, and it's still showing that it's active. Hasn't been discovered, but right. And it's the same thing on the asset side, right? In the old world, right? When you're going out there, you're going out there and you're looking at it. I mean, but how many of us have been in it? And Sasha, I'm going back to the hardware piece here, but we've all been in an asset management database where we've looked at all of the assets, and we've got somebody who's got 5, 6, 7 laptops assigned to them, fully knowing that there's only one in their possession, right? We see it all the time, but the emphasis was let's just make sure we know who has it. Let's not worry about the back end side of it, and that's the tediousness that lacks, and that's the area that we got to get better. Because again, if you're all about the data, if you're not getting rid of the old stuff, you're not helping your data.
Right.
What I've also seen. Go ahead. You go, Jason.
Where I think the CMDB is ripe to become the digital twin. And I know that sounds weird because it's like we just bashed the thing for not being accurate. You put in some agentic AI, you build out the knowledge model that the AI can compare against, and then let the AI make these changes for you.
This is such
and
a
when
good
it
idea.
when it goes beyond what should be acceptable, hey, why does this manager have 6 laptops? Why haven't we seen, they just laid off 4 people. Why haven't we seen them come back yet in a week? Hey, Mr. Manager, where are you doing with this?
Jeremy, that's a great idea. I've been thinking whilst in the last 10 minutes whilst you were all talking that I'm just trying to understand, pinpoint what was the problem in that particular case when 55,000 assets were completely wrong. The problems were basically in the organization itself. The person assigned to CMDB was understaffed, so there should have been more people.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have it clearly in the job description, and didn't have KPIs, performance metrics around the accuracy of the data.
Yeah.
The second thought I had on the back of that, the whole chain of thought, but I'll simplify it, is that it's very difficult to firstly actually formulate this for a non-ITAM person in the IT department and at the top IT level. It's not what they do on a daily basis, and I don't blame them. And ITAM is like a swamp. You get in, you can't get out. And what you just said about AI is probably a perfect solution because it solves the issue with
that's how it should be works.
finding,
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
and you can give AI KPIs. Moreover, you can ask AI to draft the initial KPIs itself and then correct them in time. You still need to look after it, but you eliminate a lot of that management level hesitation of why would I pay for it?
Right.
Because ultimately, we all say, what's the ROI on AI? It does the job 100 times quicker.
Quicker, better, cheaper.
I would disagree on better.
Well, but those are
room for improvement.
the three things that most executives are looking for when you need to measure ROI. Is it running more efficiently? Is it running less expensively? And is it completing the task faster, more quickly?
Well, it's also about the companies, and I'll say, I'll point out to all of the vendors out there, right? All the solution providers. Nobody, including the big gorilla out there, nobody has a great set of KPIs to actually manage the data quality yet. Mm-hmm. They just don't, right? And I say that not facetiously. I say that as someone who actually did program it. I did that 25 years ago for International Paper back in the day. And you can do it easily. You don't even have to have AI to do it. AI helps now because it just includes the automation. But the true KPIs and metrics and how you're looking at it, people are just they're not looking at the tedious activities. And you say, okay, go offshore, right? And some of the companies are doing it, but they're not offshoring the right things. It's being lazy, right? And I will use laziness and no disrespect, but that's what it is.
No, you're hitting on something important here. So we give all of this deference for 2 days. We gave a lot of deference to the project champions and the executives. AI is really shining a light on these mediocre middle managers that
absolutely
are just moving paper back and forth, because it becomes really obvious now whether or not those folks are actually delivering any value to the organization, because the AI can say, yeah, here, done. So one of my big beefs with ServiceNow, they've got all this data across all of these instances. Why did it take them now to say, this is what a laptop is? How much data have we been plugging into their system and they've done nothing with it for us? They know what KPIs are. They know what the asset life cycle is. How many people get logged in? What are the averages? What's the maximum? What's the minimum? How long are people in the system? How long is a laptop left out? And they won't do it.
In due time, they will. But to your point, it has to be driven by the business. Back to your point, the monetary.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, and to Jeremy, to bring that, in the past, one of the things that I've struggled is, okay, when you start talking about how old an asset is, right? What's that life cycle look like? Life cycle, there's the market right there, 3-5 years, whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the company defining it as?
Right.
What's the company? Because like if you're on a 36-month lease, or let's say you're on a 54-month lease, right, which is completely out of the norm, but that's okay for the sake of this. How do you get your tool, whether it's ServiceNow, Flexer, or whatever? How do you get your tool to not only know when it started, but when it ends? Now, in past lives, I've taken to the point where I've had my developers, create whatever the relation is. I've had my developers say, hey, this is the scheduled retirement date just based on the receive date. And they go out there and create an auto calculation for me. But it's tedious, right?
It is tedious.
But it works.
And what kind of money do you end up saving? I mean, that's we lose track. How many people actually track the error issues, the replacement issues from the ITAM activity to say, hey, this model is a lemon. We need to get rid of it because it's generating all of these failures.
Where does that line cross, right, between spend versus life?
Yes. And that goes back to my concept about tolerance. What is your tolerance for these kinds of issues that keep popping up? Maybe it's benign, you just don't care, or is it really causing you a problem?
Well, and it takes you back. It takes you back to the other thing, what we're talking about as far as the support model of it, right? Mm-hmm. We talk infrastructure. How old is that server? How long is it? What are all the problems? We should be able to go in, use the CMDB and your ITSM, your problem incident change, to say, you know what, serial number XYZ here, we've had it in place. It's 4 years old. And, this is the fourth ticket in the last 6 months on this thing.
And here's what all the other people that are using this service are reporting about issues on this branded model.
Exactly. That's what we promise.
Yeah.
And to your point, everyone says maturity, data accuracy, all sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, and it leads to everything. I know we're almost out of time, but going back to what we talked about yesterday, this is touching everything in the business for me.
Right.
It is.
Right.
Absolutely.
When you talk about servers, you're talking about operation centers, you're talking about critical business, capabilities, and us supporting and building, getting this piece right, or at least attempting to get it right, because everything changes.
Well, you do your
But
best.
the long and short of it is that we've got to make sure that we have this part connected at least, and then continue to mature it, I guess is where I'm going with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so we are at the top of the hour. As always, we're having a great conversation, which is awesome. We also have new topics for upcoming weeks, which is also phenomenal. So don't have the topic for Monday, but I'm sure we'll figure it out from what we have. But we do have this session, so feel free to connect on Monday. For that, we're going to continue again every weekday for the next 2 weeks. Make sure it happens every day. So we're going to do that, and then we'll have more of a regimented sequence of events as we move forward. But I really appreciate our entire everyone contributing, whether it was online or here on the screen. Jeremy, Sasha, and Patrick. Indiana, I can't forget about you. You've been in the background too. You've been great the last couple of days. I'm sorry you couldn't make it today, but hey, personal things come up all the time. That's what it's all about. But it's been great talking about the AMDB versus CMDB because, as we said, it's not really a technology problem. It's about how we're portraying the problem, how we're collaborating with the problem, and where we have those use cases to help drive the solution to the discussion. And that's kind of the core crux. So as much as we say versus, again, it's about collaboration because we need both. Yeah. And it's just for the right times, right reasons, and have that collaboration. So thanks again. Everyone have a great weekend and look forward to seeing you again on Monday. So talk to you soon.
Good luck all.
Take care, guys. Have a great weekend, everyone.